The father of the Asgardians, Odin, looked out over the realm of the Vanir from his high seat of Hlidskjalf. In the golden age of peace, the most esteemed members of both divine races often met in their homes. The Vanir, known for their restraint in conflict, their modesty, and their cheerful nature, were well liked among the Asgardians. Many Vanir had a penchant for joy and pleasure. The most notable among them was Frey. People worshipped him not only for the peace and prosperity he granted them, but also for bountiful harvests. One day Frey and his father Njord were in Odin's hall. As Odin held a speech in verse after generous wine indulgence, the young Frey secretly slipped out of the hall and ascended Hlidskjalf, which was forbidden. Driven by curiosity, Frey looked out from Hlidskjalf over all the worlds, as only the Allfather Odin usually did. He saw people building long houses and struggling with oxen before wooden plows. Giants roamed the cliffs. He glimpsed 3- and 6-headed giants, as well as giants with 5 and 7 hands. These malicious giants were called Thursar. Then, in the north, Frey noticed giants surrounding a splendid building. In front of the building, a girl walked across the courtyard. The sight lasted no longer than the flash of a sunbeam. Frey returned to the festivities but spoke no more words, and even withdrew from the meals, something that had never happened before. The girl in front of the fenced building was named Gerd, and she was the daughter of the feared mountain giant Skirnir. Was this the consequence of Frey's recklessness in breaking Odin's prohibition? As the god of pleasure and love, Frey was well acquainted with women. After the harsh, icy winters, he would ride festively through the land in splendidly decorated wagons, bringing fertility to crops and pastures. The most beautiful women would also give themselves to him. In Odin's hall, no one understood Frey's silence. No one dared to address him. Njord, concerned for his son, summoned Frey's companion, Skirnir the Radiant. He asked him to get Frey to speak and find out why he was sitting so dejectedly in the hall. Skirnir agreed willingly, but feared a harsh response from Frey. In response to a question, Frey said,
"How could you understand my pain? The sun shines for every blade of grass, but not for my love."
"It cannot be that powerful. How often we sat side by side at feasts where there was no room for reserve."
And he reminded Frey of his numerous affairs. Frey praised the girl in Gymir's courtyard.
When she raised her hand to open the door, the heavens and the sea glowed from her arms, and the world shone again with her radiance. When has a youth ever loved a girl like this? If I cannot have her, I no longer want to live.
After Skirnir's report, Njord understood how serious Frey was and asked his son's companion to fulfill his request and woo Gerd. The union of a god and a giantess would also promote the cohesion of the worlds. Skirnir agreed to woo Gerd if Frey would give him his sword. It fought by itself, and the bearer of the sword was considered invincible. Frey also gave him his horse, which could leap over the barrier flames, the protective firewall around Gymir's courtyard. Skirnir rode to Giant Land, well equipped and laden with gifts. The night was dark. In the morning light, the damp mountain range sparkled. Then Skirnir spoke to his horse.
"Either we bring Gerd home, or the fierce Skirnir will shatter us."
Most giants were good-natured and peaceful, but Gerd's father was one of the most quarrelsome and malicious mountain giants. Atop a hill near Gymir's court sat a watchman, keeping an eye out. From the fence of the courtyard, fierce dogs barked. Skirnir spoke to the watchman.
"I have a message for Gerd, but the dogs are furious."
"You will never see the fair one,"
called the watchman.
"You will either die trying or meet your end where you stand."
But neither watchman nor barking dogs could deter Skirnir from his mission. And Skirnir believed that he did not decide the last day of his life, spurred his horse on, and with a mighty leap, jumped over the barrier flames. In the courtyard, Gerd's brother attacked him, roaring like a furious giant, guarding his sister while their father was away. Skirnir wanted to spare him, for the brother's blood would repel Gerd. But the giant struck at Skirnir, shattering his shield and hitting him. To avoid falling, Skirnir had to draw the dreaded sword. The blade found the gap in the foe's armor and felled the mountain giant. The clash of the sword echoed into Gerd's hall. The fair maiden asked her maidservant,
"What is that noise? The ground shakes and the whole court trembles."
The maidservant reported Skirnir's bloody arrival.
"Let him come in and offer him mead."
Skirnir enters the hall and Gerd curiously asks him if he is an Asgardian or a Vanir.
"And why do you travel alone through the flickering flames?"
she adds. Skirnir denies being of divine origin and explains that he is merely a messenger of the Vanir Frey, who sends her golden apples of rejuvenation. Skirnir shows Gerd the 11 shimmering apples and says,
I give you these apples, Gerd, as a sign of Frey's love and as a request for you to show your affection towards him.
But Gerd angrily rejects the apples and exclaims,
"I will never yield to a suitor, and I will never sit in Frey's hall as long as I live."
Skirnir then pulls out the most precious of all rings and offers it to her. But she also refuses it. She is not lacking in gold or precious stones. Her father, the giant Geimir, has provided his daughters with 3 caves full of treasures. Like his master, Skirnir is also an enemy of submission and violence. But he fears for Frey's life and is determined to win Gerd for him. Gerd, stubborn and proud, continued to refuse, even though she secretly longed for the handsome Frey, as many giants did. Her fear of her father or her consideration for her brother held her back. Then Skirnir threatened drastic measures. He drew his sharp sword, its blade adorned with impressive ornaments.
I will sever your beautiful head from your neck if you do not yield,
he warned. Gerd responded defiantly,
"I will never submit to coercion or to a man's love. My father will come into the hall shortly and strike you down."
Skirnir drew his sword and pointed it towards the door.
The same goes for the old man,
he threatened. Gerd remained cold as the rock outside. Then Skirnir drew forth a rune staff and spoke to the defiant woman.
My will shall tame you, woman. You will crouch on a steep cliff, accessible only to eagles. You will feel more disgust for every meal than humans do for the most venomous snake. Madness and envy, disappointment and patience will drive you to tears. Day by day, trolls will torment you. Day by day, you shall drag yourself in hunger to the hall of the frost giants. Instead of joy, sorrow shall fill you. You shall dwell among 3-headed giants, or grow old and bent, unloved. Desire shall shake you, longing consume you. You shall wither by the wayside like a thistle. Odin shall curse you. Do you hear that, Asgardian and Vanir? I banish you from the joy and closeness of all men.
Skirnir noticed a tiny wrinkle etching deep into Gerd's skin beside her mouth as he pronounced his curses. Frey's companion paused and looked at the cowed Gerd.
Grimnir, the most hideous of monsters, shall go between your legs each day,
threatened Skirnir mercilessly.
At the gates of the underworld, trolls shall force goat piss down your throat, and no other drink shall be granted to you. Maiden, this you bring upon yourself, this I impose upon you.
He pulled out a sharp knife and began to carve runes into the staff. Signs for the giants, and into 3 staves he carved lust, suffering, and love frenzy. With deliberation, Skirnir positioned the knife, ready to unleash the power of the rune magic. At that moment, Gerd quickly handed him a filled crystal goblet and said,
"Here, drink the mead, Skirnir. If only I had known sooner how much the handsome Frey desired me."
After Skirnir drank the conciliatory drink, he asked for a message to Frey. He wanted to know when Gerd would be ready to give herself to him. With this message, Skirnir set out on his way back to Frey. Frey stood impatiently at the door as Skirnir returned. Before his companion had even taken off the saddle and taken the first step, Frey pressed for an answer.
A barley field is the place where Gerd wishes to wed you in 9 nights.
1 night is long, 2 are longer. How will I ever endure 3? Often a month passes more quickly than half a night of longing.
Despite the wait, Frey and Gerd eventually celebrated their wedding and became husband and wife. Together they had a son, Fjölnir, who grew up to be a powerful king. As a token of his gratitude, Frey gave his faithful companion, Skirnir, his sword. His love was so great that he was willing to part with this valuable weapon. Perhaps the god of fertility simply found the sword bothersome. but he could not have known how much he would miss it one day.